So the DeSouth Center for Environmental Justice, or DSCEJ, was founded by Dr. Beverly Wright in 1992. She started doing a lot of the work in what's known as Cancer Alley in Louisiana. And so the center has really been focused on environmental justice impacts and looking at the way communities are affected, and also engaging with the communities to develop leadership and ownership in those communities to address the onslaught of the petrochemical corridor impacts there, as well as other environmental justice impacts within the community. The center is very well positioned to house NBEJN, the National Black Environmental Justice Network, because one, it's one of the founding members of the network that was started 30 years ago. Movement leaders at that point in time were dealing with the toxic terror, which was caused by the, I use onslaught because that's what it is, of the toxic petrochemical corridor that you could find in Houston or Louisiana, up and down the coast there, and other areas in the Gulf South region. So having NBEJN relaunch itself really came at the precipice of the impact of COVID-19, which was disproportionately affecting and killing African Americans at a much higher rate than it was other groups in the US. The research is really clear that people who live around these toxic corridors have higher levels of asthma, have higher level of heart disease and stroke and all these other ailments that can be directly linked to pollution. And toxins were now being linked to COVID. It was in part largely to do with the fact that they were already living in spaces and places that were so polluted that COVID-19 could take advantage of their compromised immunity, their compromised health. And then you had the Harvard study that came out, I believe it was in May of 2020, and that it really spelled out why COVID-19 was really wreaking havoc on our community. And it was because of the particulate matter 2.5, or PM 2.5 as they call it, which just hitches a ride on the respiratory system of people who are already impacted by or already compromised because they live in communities where there are higher levels of pollution. That was one. So this more clear picture of what living in a pandemic era means for African Americans in the United States and other minorities in the US. And then the other big thing that even pushed it faster for us was the murder of George Floyd, the murder of Breonna Taylor, and the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. And it was just this sort of confluence of these very different things that had a similar impact. And that similar impact was that Black people were dying either at the hand of COVID or at the hands of the police, in a system that is rooted in environmental racism. And we define environmental justice as the places we live, work, worship, play, and the natural world around us. And so understanding that definition, and then understanding how environment is not simply about the air that you breathe, even though that's a part of it, it's also about the environments in which you live that either allow you to prosper and to fulfill your idea or the ideals of what American prosperity is, or that you are in a system or a situation where you are being oppressed in that American ideal because of your race, because of your socioeconomic level, because of your education, and that it was rooted in systemic racism. So the need for us to speak for ourselves, which is one of the principles of one of the 17 principles of environmental justice, was even more clear that we needed to do that. And so the relaunch of the network was really to step into the space, reclaim our voice, and to actually do the heavy lifting of working to dismantle systemic racism in all its forms.